Hi, everybody. We are back. Welcome to this session. It is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who will guide us through a hot topic that is certainly of interest to everybody here: a look into the future, changes and challenges in immigration law under the new administration. Change is a constant in our industry, but the shifts we're seeing now are truly significant, demanding a clear understanding of what lies ahead for both professionals and those navigating the complex immigration system. That's why we are honored to have with us one of the foremost experts in the field, Greg Siskind. Welcome, Greg. Thank you.
Nice to be here.
Greg has been a trailblazer in immigration law for more than 3 decades. He is the author of 7 books, numerous articles, and even key pieces of immigration legislation. His expertise has taken him all the way to the halls of Congress, where he has testified before the U.S. House of Representatives Immigration Subcommittee. He's a true pioneer in the legal space, and Greg actually launched the world's first immigration law firm website back in 1994. And he was among the first to integrate artificial intelligence into immigration tools for both lawyers and consumers. As the co-founder of Visa Law Ventures and VisaLaw.ai, Greg continues to drive innovation in the industry. His insights are sought after by major publications such as the Wall Street Journal and New York Times and NPR. And he has been recognized as one of the most distinguished immigration lawyers in the United States. Thank you so much, Greg. We're so happy to have you with us today to discuss this very important topic, and the stage is all yours.
Thank you. So I am happy to be here, and I have slides to make it a little bit easier to move through. And I am glad that, okay, they're up now. So a lot of the things that I'm going to be talking about today are hard to avoid. So you probably, you're aware. Some of them you're likely to be aware of if you're at all a consumer of news. Others maybe less so, but they give you an idea. And where I can, I'll kind of compare to the first Trump administration, and how things might be different, or how the last administration sort of gave us a preview of what we can expect to come. It's also supposed to be a look into the future, where it's really hard to do that in general, because so much of what Trump is trying to do right now is being challenged in litigation, and I will mention cases where I can. And that was one definite lesson that was learned by the immigration bar in the first Trump administration, which was that you can make you can do a lot if you're willing to litigate. And it seems like so far in this new administration, there is an appetite for that, and we've already seen quite a bit of it. Even if we haven't seen the big protests on the street, it seems like the activity in the courts is even more than what we saw in the first administration. So let's start to proceed. And first thing I thought I would mention is just sort of some late Biden changes that are starting right now to take effect, and they were done through regulation. So it's hard for the Immigration Service and Department of Labor to ignore those changes, because of the way the Biden administration methodically move these through the rulemaking process. So the big ones that I thought were worth mentioning were for the H-1B and the H-2A and H-2B programs. Those rules took effect January 17th, 2025. That date was the Friday before the Trump inauguration on the Monday following. So they really were taking effect with the Trump administration. There are a lot of changes that are in those rules. Some of them are very welcome by the immigration bar and by the immigrant communities. Some of them less so. But I'm not going to go into a lot of that now. In fact, I'm not going to go into it much at all, except to mention that you should be looking at the changes that happened. There were changes in the way a specialty occupation is defined. There were changes that made it easier for people that are business owners to qualify for H-1Bs for themselves. On the H-2A and H-2B side, there were changes as well on for example, H-2B portability was extended. So there are those changes, and there was a new I-129 form that was released to reflect those changes. So I'm mentioning this is mostly about Trump changes, but I did want to make sure that people were aware that even though these were Biden rules, they didn't take effect until the Trump administration. Likewise, the Congressional Review Act is something that you should be and have in the back of your mind. This is a statute that allows Congress to overturn a regulation, and we were worried in the about Obama rules in the beginning of the Trump administration potentially being overturned. You may recall that in 2017, when Trump took office, he also took office with with control of the Senate and the House. So it was exactly the same situation, and there was concern at that time that the high-skilled worker regulation, which had things like the grace period at the end of H-1Bs, et cetera, on there, that there were a number of those changes that were coming about, which were pretty welcome, that Congress might undo it. And the way the Congressional Review Act works is each House of Congress would basically pass a resolution saying that they want this rule reversed, and if the president signed it, then the rule actually gets reversed on there. It is very rare. I think it was successful once in the first Trump administration, and I don't think that there are resolutions right now that have been introduced to reverse both the H-1B and the H-2 regulations, both H-2A and H-2B that were in the same one. There was also a regulation that allowed automatic extensions for employment authorization documents that was part of the H-1B rule that allowed for longer extensions. And, so those are potentially in danger. I wouldn't say right now there seems to be very much of an effort, to whip up support to overturn those regulations. Might be because the dynamic is a little bit different this time than last time, and it's worth mentioning as well. The last time there was a clear frontal assault on skilled workers by the administration. This time, Elon Musk, who we all know has a very influential role in the administration, has made it really, really clear that he is watching closely changes that would impact the H-1B program in a negative way. It may be that that the USCIS and the administration is just being careful on how they. I do think there will probably be changes that aren't going to be welcome, but they might be indirect changes that impact the program as opposed to changes directly. So that is something to keep an eye on, and also to watch that dynamic between what Trump's Silicon Valley donors want versus what Stephen Miller in the White House wants. And we've already seen that battle play out in public, and we'll see more of that probably in the next couple of years. By the way, one other thing to pay attention to as far as the dynamics in comparison to last time. The last time the Democrats got control of the House in the midterm election, and that led to a lot more pushback or at least less support from Congress. I do think there will probably be a rush to do as many things as can be done in this first session of Congress while the Republicans have control. I'm not sure how far that's going to go, but considering the fact that Republicans only have a 3-seat majority in the House of Representatives and 3 Senate seats right now, majority in the Senate, there's a significant chance that one or both houses will flip in the next election. So the activity of Congress in this area in the negative way is probably going to be more on the front end of the administration than the second half. All right, so let's keep going. So the first issue I wanted to give people an update on, and we saw even more of this yesterday, USCIS has been has been changing over a lot of forms. It seems like it's probably at least a dozen forms now. And they keep doing it in batches. Why are they changing all these forms? Well, it's because of the president's executive order on transgender rights, and so they have been going back and changing language about how they refer to people. So it's not gender, it's sex is the terminology changing. And also, they had gone away from the use of the term alien, and for some reason we're going back to that. So that requires new forms. There was quite a controversy a couple of weeks ago because USCIS released all those forms, released a bunch of those forms, including the I-45, a pretty major form, and announced that they were, even though the forms had dates on them that were earlier, they weren't released. And when they were released, USCIS said, these all are in effect immediately. And if you don't if you don't use these forms, we're going to reject them. Well, problem is there were quite a few people who had already submitted applications, and those applications were in transit, and potentially people would have even lost status if they had been filing the applications just in time to be able to remain in status. The American Immigration Lawyers Association sued, and within 24 hours of that suit being filed, USCIS backed down and then gave a rollout period and said that I think it was 6 weeks that they gave for the use of those forms. So that was obviously that suit was welcome, but also hopefully it sent a message to USCIS that the bar will push back if there are efforts like that are going to hurt our clients and hurt immigration lawyers. So I was happy to see that. Okay, continuing on, parole and TPS programs are under attack. So the first thing that we had seen was basically there are 9 countries that are part of the parole program. The humanitarian parole programs created by President Biden, and the first one was the program for Ukrainians, and then came a program for Haitians and the others in Latin America and Guatemala and Colombia, and then there was another program. And that program was basically for people that had family applications that were pending that allowed people to enter the U.S. And wait it out in the United States while their priority dates advanced for them to be able to pursue family petitions. And I apologize if you hear a cat in the background that's crying. The other program was the CHNV program. That's Colombia, Honduras, Nicaragua, Venezuela, I believe. And that program was more of a program that was done for reason that was targeting people that were coming into the U.S. and applying for asylum from within the United States. And what that program allowed them to do was to, instead of coming to the U.S. border, to apply in their countries, they can come to the U.S. in a legal status, and then potentially pursue asylum claims from the United States. But all those programs, they announced that they were stopping new applications. But they, in the last couple of weeks, we've also seen announcements about early terminations of those programs. And that would, even last week, we saw an announcement about the end of the CHNV programs early, and I believe that or it might have even been earlier this week, but that program is going to be ending in April, and it's already caused quite a scramble because at the same time, there are temporary protected status programs that have been available to some of these folks. And the administration has been announcing early ends to those programs as well. So the temporary protected status program for Venezuela and Haiti are the two that we've seen. I believe the Ukrainian program is also ending early. And it seems like an effort to try and push people into undocumented status and then pursue removal for them after their status is taken away. So, one other pressure point that's being used in that regard, and this is one that maybe you've heard less about, is there is a secret memo that is in place at Department of Homeland Security. CBS News confirmed it. Then it was confirmed as well by Bloomberg, and I've actually talked to both those reporters about it. They're not. They've had they don't. Well, at least one of them doesn't have the copy of it, but they have it confirmed from several sources that it exists. But basically, what that memo is saying is that anybody that is in these TPS or parole programs that's applying for any kind of benefit, that could be an employment authorization document. It could be, they got married to a U.S. citizen and have applied for a green card. It could be an asylum application, anything that they have been applying for. There's a freeze on adjudication of those benefits. The stated justification is that they are investigating fraud, even though to even get into those programs, there's background checking that happens. So it seems to me that it's part of a strategy of trying to pressure people to self-deport that are in those programs. There are lawsuits already that are filed on, for example, the Ukrainians. There's a suit in Boston that has been filed by a couple of major nonprofits that would reverse both the parole program early termination and the TPS termination, as well as the secret memo is also a subject of that litigation. There are suits on the TPS revocations for Venezuela and Haiti. And there was, I believe, so anyway, so we're watching how that goes. By the way, on TPS revocations, even though the president has a lot of authority to create a TPS program, he doesn't have as much authority to get rid of a TPS program early. And the reason for that is that the president still, and the reason why we know that is that in the first Trump administration, there was an effort to end the program for Honduras and for El Salvador and for Nicaragua. I believe those were the three countries, or it might have been Guatemala. Anyway, there were three TPS countries that he tried to revoke TPS status. There was a lawsuit that was filed, and basically the standard that was that you can't just arbitrarily yank TPS for people. You have to show there have been country conditions that have changed that would justify the early termination, and they weren't able to show it then. So those programs survived even the Trump's attempt to reverse them, and obviously that'll be pretty influential for how the courts proceed with these new revocations. So I'm not as pessimistic, even though the president has lots of authority in that space, that he's going to be successful. Just because just this week we saw the Trump administration announce that they were doing a secondary tariff on companies that are doing business with with Venezuela. And we've seen a lot of rhetoric about negative rhetoric about the Venezuelan government. It's hard to see why, without any change in government, without with really almost nothing changing except the White House changing, why the conditions have justify ending that program early. Okay, so moving on, the next big thing, registration. This is something that is new for this administration. Didn't try this in the first Trump administration. This was announced on March 12th. DHS published a rule requiring people to register their presence and provide fingerprints if they're in the U.S. for 30 days or more. And this would include people that enter the U.S. without inspection. It doesn't include certain groups like people that are already in removal proceedings. It doesn't include people that came that have I-94s, but it includes a lot of people. So that program is going into effect in April, and it's creating a lot of it's creating challenges for immigration lawyers on how to advise clients about that. As far as the undocumented community goes, that it's sort of a damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you don't register, it's potentially a misdemeanor, criminal violation, and it might have an impact on future benefits availability if the person doesn't do that. And then also, it's the question of like, well, if I register, it's also I'm on the radar with the government. So I think that as lawyers, we obviously have ethical obligations not to advise clients to be breaking laws, and so immigration lawyers, I think, are being careful about how they advise. I'm not going to tell you what to tell your clients, but I will say that I think that your job as lawyers is just to basically explain the law and explain the consequences of violating the law, and then let your clients make take their actions based on that information. One other group that was a bit of a surprise, but maybe it shouldn't be, is the Canadians that are coming to the U.S. For 30 days or longer. Keep in mind that those Canadians, many of them do not get an I-94. So if you have Canadian clients and they don't have an I-94, they may need to deal with the fingerprinting and the registration. And I'm sure that the conflict with Canada that the president has created has nothing to do with it. And also children have to register within 30 days of turning 14 years old. And this is both non-immigrant children and children that are without status on there. And that's something that lawyers are going to have to remind their business clients and their student clients about, that if they have children that are turning 14, they're going to have to comply with that. Okay, continuing on. Consulates, USCIS. So there are some changes that are sort of direct changes that are affecting our practice, and then there are some that are indirect. And in this category, there are several that are indirect. So some of it's sort of a replay of what we saw in the first Trump administration. That includes the resignations, mostly at the consular side. I don't think I've heard too much about USCIS losing people based on resignations, but we do know that a lot of people left the State Department started leaving after the election, and that is that's important because there is I don't believe I don't believe it's a hard and fast rule, but my understanding is that the directives to all federal agencies is that they are only supposed to hire one new person for each 4 people that are leaving. And that obviously cuts down on consular staff. Also, there are local hires at consulates abroad that do a lot of essential functions at the consulates. They are oftentimes, doing a lot of the administrative stuff that keeps cases moving in a timely manner. They're the ones that are processing people, handling passports, doing all kinds of tasks that if you didn't have these folks, you have you have consular officers that have to do those jobs instead, which means less interviews. It means less, it means each case is going to end up taking longer to handle. And as you can see from the bullet point, there were news reports that some consular chiefs have been told to terminate up to 20% of local hires. So that is going to have an impact. There have been cuts proposed for USCIS and State Department, et cetera, in a budget bill that Congress approved, I think, by one vote. And there will be big, this was partially to keep the government from shutting down. But anyway, there are, pretty substantial cuts to USCIS that are in that bill. And it's not really clear where they're going to be cutting. Obviously, a lot of USCIS gets its funding from fees and not from Congress, but that's not everything. So, for example, asylum applications, even though they're partially subsidized now by other applications fees, they still depend at USCIS to a great extent on money from Congress. So that is a pressure point that could slow things down. You may have heard that various agencies have been having officers that have been diverted to ICE to aid with enforcement efforts, and that includes USCIS. So again, people being taken off of the adjudication lines and being put to work with ICE means less people to work applications. And then one other thing that was just only a few days ago, the visa interview waiver program at consulates has been heavily used since COVID. And that, before COVID, there was a requirement that you had, if you wanted an interview waiver, you had to be applying within 12 months of your visa expiring for a new visa if you wanted to avoid having to do the interview. That was raised to 48, and that's going back to 12. There was some hope that if Biden got reelected, that would stay in place, but that is going away now as well. So all of those things mean you can count on longer processing times for for your USCIS applications. You can count on longer consular processing times as well. Okay, next slide. Transgender policy changes. So I mentioned before what was happening on the forms. This kind of stems from the same executive order, but it does have more serious consequences for people that are transgender. One is a statement from the State Department that they could apply a permanent fraud bar under the INA if a transgender applicant misrepresents their birth sex on visa applications. So, this is going to put that community in a difficult spot where they're going to have to basically comply with the administration's views on this particular issue, or potentially face some pretty serious consequences in terms of the fraud bars. Also, in the Biden administration, passports had changed to allow a person to have to have their new gender reflected in the passport, and apparently passport applications are now going to be rejected if people don't list their biological sex at birth. And then also on the ICE front, transgender women could be moved into men's detention facilities or put in isolation and be denied also medications that they require as part of their transition. So that is that policy. One that when we're talking about the future, this is a little bit different than the last Trump administration in a couple of regards. First off, in 2017, that was the kickoff. The travel ban that was announced, pretty much, I think, within the first 24 hours of the first Trump administration. You may remember sort of the fiasco at airports and the airport lawyers that went in, and also there was litigation that was filed within 24 hours challenging it. Just to kind of refresh your memory on what happened with the travel bans the last go around, you had a number of cases that were filed. The first version of the travel ban was thrown out by the courts. The Trump administration released a second attempt at a travel ban that was thrown out by the courts. The third version was accepted in the Trump v. Hawaii case. And that one, that's a Supreme Court case, and that's, so that's the final say on it. But essentially allows the president to have a travel ban as long as they've gone through a process to justify it, which means, and really what they relied on the most in the first Trump administration was saying that these countries didn't cooperate on intelligence sharing and properly helping the U.S. government to screen people that were coming into the country. This time around, the New York Times broke the story a couple weeks ago that there would be 43 different countries covered this time, but being covered in different ways. So, the red list is the one that looks most closely resembling the first Trump administration. Sudan, Venezuela, by the way, was added the last go around because there was some pushback saying this is a Muslim ban. They said, no, it's not a Muslim ban. Look, we've added Venezuela. But Venezuela and Cuba are on the list. North Korea is on the list, and some of the countries are expected. But it's also been reported that Pakistan and Afghanistan, I guess Afghanistan is not a surprise, but Pakistan would be a major issue because there are a lot of high-skilled Pakistani workers that are in the United States. So that's one to pay a lot of attention to. I'm a little bit surprised that that's happening, but that's on the list. The orange list will be, probably limiting on certain types of visas like tourist visas, potentially student visas, and then, but work visas might come through. And the yellow list is a list of countries that are being scrutinized for a potential ban. So you're going to have to get familiar with those. Also, if you're advising clients from any of these countries, you need to let them know now that they might want to be, not traveling and get back to the United States quickly, because the way travel bans work under 212F is a ban on entry. It's not a ban on having the status in the U.S. So what happened last time and what will happen this time is it will only cover people that are trying to seek entry to the U.S. The other thing to pay attention to is whether this bars people from getting visas or not. And the Trump administration the last time tried to take the position that there's a ban on entry, there needs to be a ban on issuing visas as well, because these people can't enter the country. I know that issue very well because I was one of the lawyers that sued on that particular issue, particularly during the COVID bans, where these countries would have you couldn't enter the U.S. if you'd been in a particular list of country in the last 2 weeks. And we sued saying that you should be able to get a visa. And if you choose to go to another country for 2 weeks, you'd be able to enter at that point. But we did get that issue. We litigated that issue 6 times because the Trump administration just wouldn't change their policy, and they kept reapplying it over and over again. But we do have good decisions on that particular issue, and we'll just have to see how these roll out, because what we don't want to see happen is backlogs to get so long for issuing visas that once a ban is lifted, that it's impossible to get appointments, and it will take forever to get to actually get a visa to enter the United States. Okay. This part of it, this discussion is seems like ever changing. So I did the first draft of these slides a couple weeks ago on there, and there was obviously a lot of news since. But we have already seen removals or people being arrested that are in non-immigrant status and green card status based on their political opinions. There are sections of the Immigration and Nationality Act that allow a president to pursue removing individuals who are deemed a foreign policy threat to the U.S. or are subversives. And these were provisions that came into force in the 1952 Act, McCarthy era. Should have been removed a long time ago, and they haven't. But they have been using those provisions. There's been immediate pushback in the courts. You all probably heard about the Columbia activist who was the first one, I think, to make the news on that, and there have been several others since. There have been, but anyway, the judges seem like if the administration wants to try and use those provisions, that especially permanent residents, but probably everybody that's here is going to be able to at least get a hearing with the judge as a matter of due process. And that's going to be the name of the game for a while. The administration would like to find ways, especially claiming foreign policy, to avoid due process and have immediate removals, but that's where the fights are taking place in the courts. Practical advice for clients, this seems like people are getting into trouble for things that they have on their phones or things that they're posting on social media. And it's a good idea to warn clients about that, that's a good way to get on the radar. So if you're traveling with your phone and with your social media, you don't have a lot of constitutional rights at a port of entry when you're seeking entry to the United States. I will say, I think AILA put a practice advisory out recently, which we've been distributing to our clients about phones and searches at ports of entry. And if you're an AILA member, I would suggest you find that document, that client flyer, and consider distributing that. AI policy changes. I'll go through that one very quickly. The Biden administration issued an executive order telling agencies to make a lot of changes to make it easier for Silicon Valley to recruit and retain top AI workers that have machine learning backgrounds and others. The Trump administration revoked that executive order, and so there's been some worry that changes that were made in the USCIS policy manual affecting O's, EB-1s, NIWs that were related to that would be revoked. But it seems like Trump has issued a new executive order that seems similar. So I'm hopeful that we're not going to see that happen, and that might be another example of the Elon effect, where USCIS might be really careful about making life harder for AI companies, since Elon owns one of the biggest. The suspension of the refugee program, immigration lawyers don't typically handle refugee applications, but it is important to know that the administration has a temporary suspension on the admission of refugees. A lot of non-government organizations have also been cut off from not just money for helping refugees come into the U.S. now, but also being cut off from money that was owed to them. So there are a lot of organizations that assist with that. If you're looking for good charities to donate to right now that could really use your help, those they're there. But it is obviously, if people enter in refugee status to the U.S., they might after that work with an immigration lawyer, for example, on adjusting status. So this has an indirect effect on immigration lawyers. There is litigation that has been filed in that regard, so watch how that plays out. Birthright citizenship, that was one of the first issues to get litigated. 4 cases, 4 different courts, 4 defeats for the administration, and nationwide injunctions on applying that. Trump administration, not surprisingly, is trying to get the Supreme Court to intervene. Supreme Court, I am hopeful I really don't think that they are interested in reversing the 120-year-old or 140-year-old case that enshrines birthright citizenship and says it's the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. But anyway, no action yet on that. Lack and Riley was also one of the first things. Most immigration lawyers that are doing business immigration are probably not paying that much attention to it, but there are some visa implications. This is the one that allows for mandatory detention for people that have been just arrested, not even convicted. And it gives states, but the state attorney general have the power to sue the federal government if they believe that federal immigration policies are not protecting their states. That could come up to haunt business immigration lawyers if states decide to file lawsuits on protectionist grounds. And then also foreign nationals that are processing at consulates from countries that are not deemed to be cooperating with the U.S. and accepting deported citizens could find disruptions in visa issuance. I'm going to skip that slide for right now and just get to the late breaking news slide. These things you probably have already been seeing, but basically the targeting of tourists by CBP from Canada, the United Kingdom, Germany have been some of the examples of that, have led to a variety of new travel warnings against the U.S. from countries like Denmark, Finland, the UK, Germany. Huge amounts of tourists come in from those countries. And that could have an impact, and it could have an impact on business immigration as well. But certainly in states that get a lot of European tourism are going to have an impact one way or the other. Immigration lawyers under fire from the White House last Friday night. Most of you probably heard that there was an executive order asking the Department of Justice lawyers to refer to state bars and try and seek sanctions with judges against lawyers that are pursuing quote unquote frivolous claims, which seems like that's in the eye of the beholder. I'm not that worried that that's going to stop the litigation that needs to be happening. But I do know a lot of lawyers are worried about the consequences of that. We have seen at least one state bar, the New York State Bar, already issue a public statement, as well as the American Bar Association, criticizing the administration for attacking lawyers. So hopefully our bars will stick together and not allow this basic politicization of the ethics rules and of the judiciary rules. And the Alien Enemies Act, that's the last thing I'll end on, and I'll take questions after that. But Judge Boasberg, you've heard, presumably you heard about the Venezuelans and the deportations. Judge Boasberg, by the way, was one of the judges in our our visa ban cases for the fiancés. I thought he was a very fair judge. He's a Bush appointee, by the way. He's not exactly sort of the way he's been portrayed by the administration. But that big one is, what happens when the administration decides that they are going to ignore a court order? And if they feel free to ignore court orders, are we in a constitutional crisis? Is the separation of powers broken down? A lot of big questions are going to be coming from that case, and we should actually, in the next couple of days, probably have a better idea on what Judge Boasberg is going to do about the failure to adhere to his oral order regarding the return of planes to the United States. Big issue that's going to affect all of immigration law, if not all of law in general. So keep an eye on that. And with that, I'm done with my slides. Sorry for being a minute or two late on that, but I will try and answer as many questions as I can. I don't know if
all right.
If you want to pick them out for me.
Yeah, absolutely, Greg. Absolutely. Thank you so much for all that fantastic information. Let's see if we can get through a few of these questions in the next 10 minutes. So, Greg, what is your long-term view on policy changes? Do you think things will get worse with time? What do you foresee happening between now and then?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit more optimistic on business immigration being less disrupted as far as direct changes go, mainly because I think that the anti-immigrants like Stephen Miller and others are focusing a lot more of their attention right now on removals of people that either have unpopular political opinions or without immigration status. And that's horrible in itself. But I think that they will be a lot more careful about how they target employment immigration, and that's so that's one thing that I'm maybe a little bit more optimistic than the last time, although I'm very pessimistic regarding processing times and how that's going to impact all of our clients who are on there. But that's, that being said, I'm also worried. Well, and I'm worried, and I didn't mention this was also another late breaking news item, but the ombudsman's office that has been so great for 20 years, the CIS ombudsman, they were shut down last week based on an order from the DHS secretary. That worries me a lot because basically, they were the watchdog that was keeping an eye on what was happening internally for the government. And now that they're gone, it seems like we'll have a lot less of that. One other thing that really worries me that also should have been late breaking news was a statement that came out the other day from Marco Rubio saying that their reading of all visa policy, both in and out of the U.S., is foreign policy, and so they seem to be taking the position that the Administrative Procedures Act doesn't apply to immigration, which is a massive change in the in policy. That will, I've already been asked if I'm going to sue on that issue. I think, the way we'll have to work is we'll have to actually see them apply that. So attempt to, have some new policy that they impose without rulemaking. And if that happens, there will be litigation that happens pretty quickly after that. I don't think there's anything really to sue on right now, just from that statement until we can actually say somebody's going to be harmed directly from what was stated.
Thanks, Greg. And yeah, it seems like we're getting a lot of late breaking news on the regular now, and a lot of offices closing in different sectors.
Yeah.
You mentioned business immigration hopefully not being affected too much. One of the other questions specifically asks if you have any thoughts about how this could affect EB-2 NIW.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, just in general, I think that the attitude usually changes, in a when an administration has a restrictionist view of the world, it usually seems like applications where there's a lot of judgment on the part of the examiner. Just in general, I would expect to see denial rates increase in EB-1, EB-2 national interest waivers, and any of the categories where there's a lot of discretion on the part of the examiners. Maybe less so on the ones that are sort of more objective applications where you meet the criteria, and if you demonstrate that, you qualify for the benefit, as opposed to trying to convince an officer that your arguments are good ones and the person meets the criteria on there. So that would be one. I mentioned the AI order and other STEM changes that came in that made the NIW category a little bit easier. I'm hopeful that we'll still see some of that. Without a lot of change. I really think probably if we see changes that seem to be impacting on the success of Silicon Valley companies, and there's a lot of pushback from Trump donors, we'll probably see a reaction to that, but that's hard to gauge at this point. So I'm not expecting NIWs to get easier, but how much more difficult we see right now. There hasn't been any policy changes yet that I think will make those categories harder to use. But just in general, I think adjudications, I would expect to see more requests for evidence and more denials. And warn your clients about that on there, that's likely to happen when you're starting a case, that it's a different world.
Absolutely. And We have a couple questions as well about business immigration, Greg, about the gold card proposal and the future of EB-5. If you have any comments about that, please.
Yes, there is no gold card. There was a musing from the president that wouldn't it be nice if we had this on there, but there is no program that's in place. Congress would have to create that. There was a news report this week that the first 1,000 people had applied for it or got it, and that was all nonsense. Tell your clients that there is no program. When there is a program, you will let them know. We will all find that out. There will be rules. There will be a way that happens, but Congress is going to have to either create that, or the president is going to have to use one of those programs that he has been condemning, like the parole programs, to bring people in those particular categories. And I'm guessing that that's not going to happen. So that's the gold card. I don't see that happening because basically people who have that kind of money usually don't want the tax consequences of being a U.S. permanent resident or a citizen. But you never know on there. I don't have a problem, by the way, with this whole idea of a gold card. But if it's a replacement for EB-5, I have a problem with that. So if you had the EB-5 program and the gold card program, and by the way, there are countries that have multiple programs for, that are different categories for people that want to invest money in that country. So I don't see a problem with the U.S. having more than one investor program. But the EB-5 program just got reformed in a major way in 2022. A lot of problems with that program were fixed by those rules. And so I would be surprised. I was surprised that there was an attack on that program already, since there were so many Republicans in Congress that were part of the regulatory changes that came about. So I think EB-5 is here for a while. It would be nice if there were more visas available in that program, because a lot of the problems with that program right now stem from the backlogs that have been created because it's popular with a couple of countries that instead of across the board. So that's that category.
All right, and with the couple minutes we have left, Greg, the final topic people have been asking a few questions about are the travel ban lists. I'll throw a couple at you if you can just comment in the last couple minutes.
Yeah.
Do you think people on these lists should refrain from traveling? What about people entering from the red list with LPR status?
Yeah, I would. If you're on the red and the orange list, are definitely, you should be having conversations with clients about the risks of travel. But even on the list of the countries that are going to get a warning, just in general, we know people are getting a lot. They're being hassled a lot more at ports of entry. A lot more people being put into secondary inspection. I would always, say you need to have a conversation with clients that they should only be traveling at least for several weeks and maybe a few months until we kind of see how things shake out. Avoid unnecessary, a travel that's not urgent. If you are going to travel, make sure you have lots of documentation to prove that that your client is maintaining their status and everything they're doing is consistent with the visa. So get recent pay stubs and letters from employers that verify everything is still correct. Make sure they have their documentation. People need to be be prepared if they get put into secondary inspection. You need to have the conversations about their phones and social media, et cetera, with them. So I would say you should expect to be getting those questions from clients. And if they ask them, I can just tell you what our firm is doing, which is like I said, we sent a warning out to all our clients, basically telling them, regardless of nationality right now, to be much more cautious about travel than they have been. It seems like there is just sort of a randomness as well to who's having problems and who's not, and who's not. So everybody needs to be prepared, regardless of whether they're on the travel list or on the travel ban list or not. But particularly for that group, they're on notice now that they need to be back in the United States quickly. If they're not, and you've warned them, that's their choice. But you at least need to give them notice that that's going to be happening, or probably going to be happening.
Amazing. Thanks, Greg. We have about 10 seconds left. I'm going to ask you one more question. If you can give me a quick yes or no, that's interesting. With cartels being labeled as foreign terrorist organizations by the administration, do you think we could see Mexico added to the travel ban list?
Yes. Nothing surprises me anymore.
Amazing. Amazing. Great. Well, thank you so much, Greg. And I think that sums it up perfectly. Nothing's going to surprise us. There's lots of
Thank you,
late-breaking
Joorney,
news every
for
single day.
inviting me. You guys put on a good program, so I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Greg. We're so happy to have you, and thanks to everybody for participating in this session. If you have any more questions for Greg, we couldn't get to everything. We posted his information. You can reach out to him or reach out to us, and we're happy to see if we can answer those in the future. Thank you so much, Greg.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.